Guess what? Stefan likes metal. I like metal. It's time for some smooth jazz reviews.
Yeah.
It's more metal this week. I actually am going to make a point to not pick metal next week.
I am too, though.
Then I'll pick metal next week.
Yeah, I'm not picking metal next week either.
Yeah, I will.
I put you through a painful loop.
Oh, this week is... Oh, my God, Stefan.
The nightmare
Your
juice.
pick.
My pick was...
I'm going to go first on this one.
You can go first. All right.
So my pick this week was a technical death metal band. I think that's what they're technically...
That's what they're under. Yeah, and they're from Vancouver.
Oh, they're Canadian, British Columbia. They're right up my alley. It's ArchSpire is the band. Relentless Mutation is the album. And I feel like that was a really good name for the album, both for the style and for the concept. Now, going into this album, I picked it strictly because I was like grasping at some straws for something to review.
I'm going to say it is definitely the better out of their two releases.
You checked out the other one too?
Yep.
What's their other release?
Let me bring up the name real quick.
Okay, I'm going to continue on with mine. I'll generally try and go through something and just wait till something catches my interest in sound alone. Or until somebody actually like goes out of their way to recommend their stuff.
It was called the Lucid Collective.
You got some album artwork for both of these?
It looks like a...
it looks like Dr. Manhattan?
Yeah.
Let's bring up the album artwork for
Relentless
Mutation. So basically you said exactly what I thought when I started listening to it. It's like Death Clock.
It's technical Death Clock.
Up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the when the Batman death metal videos where it's just like he'd be like really pursed lips and they're just literally taking like Death Clock songs and doing an animation to it. I'm just like literally picturing that death metal Batman just like slamming his butt comically on stuff while he just goes kind of.
Except
but it's like
he does this. Yeah, he does this Machine Gun Kelly style delivery, where it's just like,
which is very.
It's very impressive.
It's like death rap. Carl, a guy I used to work with in one of my previous projects, he would use that term a lot, death rap. And his execution wasn't necessarily like so skilled like this, but
this was skilled.
But what it reminded me of the editing process of like actually going through something that is so rapid fire. This man, I know, is not able to take in that much air and spit that much fucking celibacy out that perfectly.
I just want to say on this topic was the rapid fire stuff. It reminded me of like old new metal stuff for a little bit, but it wasn't. I'm not going to say it was all bad, but it did over the course of like multiple listens lose its charm, if you will, for me.
I personally liked it, but it's because I wasn't necessarily like I wasn't just focusing on like the delivery of the lyrics. There
is a lot more to this album than just the singing. That is for sure.
Yeah. The songs, like the lyrics are kind of like static in its style. It's all very rapid fire machine gun style. But the name of the album in the instrumentation of it, Relentless Mutation, I thought was very appropriate before I even looked into the subject matter, which I rarely do on these kinds of albums because it's usually just like guts, ghouls, morbid stuff, which it's very much so this, but it's not like delegated to that. There's actually some like world building to it. But for just the instrumentation of it, I felt like they did a lot of permutations of metal tropes that I've heard before, but it's not turned up to 11. It's turned up to like 12 or 13. It is just, it's got all the things I love about fucking metal. It's got blast beats, it's got riffs, it's got just like drawn out.
It was like opening up one of those canned springy snakes, and it just goes like,
and it like each little rung of it is like a different style.
yeah.
But they're also doing like these interesting things where they're doing like permutations of themes that they set out, but they just do it so quick that you don't even realize that like certain things are potentially like related.
At least not on your first listen.
It's so much shit just like flies by you, but I fucking love that. Like as a guitar player, and just like a death metal, I'd say maybe at this point ex-death metal aficionado and musician, that I really appreciate the effort it took to just pack all this shit in.
It was definitely well put as a technical death metal album. That is for sure.
So like it just kept on going on as like these mutations, like one like maybe like a reiteration of something that they did, or just like a style that you have heard in another song. Like I swear to God, there is in what was the one that you like, the tumor Relentless Tumor Seeker or something like that. I actually have like a little
Remote tumor seeker. Yeah, I was like, that one's a banger. I liked Calamus will animate, and a dark horizontal was good too.
With the Remote Tumor Seeker song, there is straight up a neoclassical progression.
Yep.
I heard in a Children of Bodom song before. It follows the exact same interval progression. I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but
it's definitely neoclassical. You can hear
it is.
You can hear it.
It is the same progression though. It is exactly the same. I'm not saying that they stole it. It's just Children of Bodom got it from someplace else too, you know?
Yeah.
But it is literally the same fucking like natural progression. And I was like, oh man, I used to listen to a song with that same progression over and over and over again years ago in the same genre.
It just clicked eventually.
It's like, what do I call it? No, like it clicked today. Like I used to like really like this one song. It was off of one of Children of Bodom's early albums. I think it was Something Wild. I hate late Children of Bodom. So bad. But the early stuff is just like this crazy shreddy Norwegian fucking fantasy ride. Wow. It's just Alexi Leo's fucking vocals.
Yeah. Seen them live. That was pretty fun.
But now I haven't even gotten into like the meat of the analysis, because I usually don't, particularly with metal, look into like the lyrical content, because it's just all like
ghouls and spookies and murders and other dimensions and shooting through space or
apparently,
whatever else.
This one has a world that it exists in through the entire album, because actually
it's like a concept album type thing.
Yeah, I was not expecting it, because I tried to look up some information on the band and the actual individuals behind it.
I was mostly looking up band history, and they don't have much because they only recently have been signed to Seasons of the Mist.
So
although this album, personally, for them has done really well on multiple fronts. I think a big part of that has to do now being signed with Seasons of the Mist. They get a little bit of label push in the back for support on certain news sites and stuff like that, because without a label, you're not getting the bill footed for some of those record spots and stuff like that.
I don't know. I have actually seen some like local sludge bands get some play on some music blogs. Like sometimes that's like what kind of pushes you in. It's like what comes first.
Well, I'm talking like
chicken or the egg.
I'm talking like more specific sites,
but so this album has this like theme about this what's called it's referred to as a black matter. It's in the if you could call up the album art for this, there's this overarching story about two entities that are kind of nefarious, and maybe one might be considered maybe like Lovecraftian in the aspect that it's just a thing doing what the thing does. And then there's a nefarious entity trying to study it. So, yeah, that's a representation of the black matter that is referenced in all the songs. It's not really said if it's like a spiritual thing or a biological thing. It alludes to both. But there's basically in the first song, it's talking about I think it's called Involuntary Doppelganger. And
that's the first one.
The song talks about how this cult came, and the subject of the song became like a subject of this cult, and what the cult did was they exposed him to this black matter. And it's not really like presented like that in originally, but basically this black matter has this effect on this person where he is still like sentient. He like still kind of like recalls like his past experiences and like who he is, but he's able to like essentially devour people and become them. And he goes like through, it's like a kind of like a tale about him like going throughout his days just devouring people and being able to become
a Venom
them.
symbiote or some shit?
Yeah, kind of, but he's like able to like turn himself into like the flesh of other people and like present himself as such. And there's in the first song, which I thought was a little peculiar because it didn't really like, the tale didn't really give any like semblance of like time. You could put this like in any like era, but they refer to this cult, or not even a cult at this stage. He talks about the tongues that he eventually speaks in only being decipherable by the A.U.M, the AUM. And it's never said exactly what the AUM is. And it kind of like when you have an abbreviation like that, like working in our kind of like corporate world, it has this like corporation kind of ring to it.
Yeah, because you abbreviate everything because it's faster to say than...
Right. But it's later revealed that this is a cult initially. Like overarching, it is a cult. And they have laboratories and stuff where they are intentionally taking this like black liquid that they discovered called the drip, and they expose it to people, and it has various degrees of like effects on people. And a bunch of the songs are about different effects it has on its
different
subjects. Now, particularly the Remote Tumor Seeker had this really interesting story because the vocalist apparently wrote it about a real principle called split brain theory. Have you ever heard of this? I hadn't either. And when I started digging into it, I was like, wow, I was not expecting to go here today. So split brain theory is this thing where it's been observed in a man who was having epileptic seizures. And what they decided to do, this is real life, they split the lobe in the brain that connects the two lobes, or not the little part in the middle that connects the two lobes so they can communicate. Okay. And the surgery was a success, but they ran these tests on him, and all these interesting questions about like how like the subconscious works started like popping up. So they tested him. They had him stare at a screen with a dot in the center of the screen. They're just like stare at the dot, and on the right side it would like flash a word, and they'd be like, "What did that say?" And he'd be like, "Pan." And then they'd put a picture up, and he'd be like, "Frog." And then they'd flash one on the left side, and he'd be like, "I don't know." And then they'd be like, could you close your eyes? Now use your left hand to draw. And he would draw what he saw. It was like this principle where I don't know if I'm getting the hemisphere is correct for this, but one side of the brain controls speech and like reading and pronunciation, where the other one controls like visualizations, visualizations and like drawing, something like that. But he was able to look at it and see it, but he couldn't say it. But he could draw it with his eyes closed. And it wasn't a good drawing either.
Well, yeah, his eyes are closed, so I'd assume it wouldn't be that great. And he probably wasn't an artist in the first place.
But it was like one of the first things where they discovered that there was definitive proof that the two hemispheres of the brain
function differently.
Not just function differently, but there's things going on where the conscious mind was not aware of it. Because he was not able to... He was fully conscious of it, and he wasn't able to like comprehend the things that his hand would do, but his body obviously understood.
Here's a real question. Did the seizures stop?
Yes.
Oh, good for him.
Yes, they did. That's why I said the surgery is a success. So the split brain theory was put into this banger song particular. It's called Remote Tumor Seeker, where this AUM entity, they have a subject, and it's specifically said like in one of their laboratories, and they take this black matter and create a tumor in one of the lobes of the subject's brain, and it basically creates this like split brain thing where one side is the predator and the other side is the prey, but the side that the tumor is taken over cannot recognize the other side because there's no communication between it. So it drives him to this murderous state where he thinks that the other half of his brain is out there someplace, and it drives him to fucking murder and kill.
How decidedly
in search of his other half, and he splits all of his victims' heads open, trying to find the other half of his brain.
How incredibly death clock.
I know. But the thing that tipped me off to this being like a technological kind of like maybe like a corporate kind of entity that's been infiltrated by a cult is that they specifically reference like this tracking camera where this is a victim of an experiment. And there's a tracking device in him, and there's a camera in him, and they're observing him murdering.
This fool's got a GoPro on his forehead.
But oh my God, it just ranges from like pestilence and like not necessarily like a zombie infection, but like an entity infection.
Yeah.
And that's like the overarching story. There's like a bunch of other chapters. I don't want to spoil it all, but it all has to do with
so the people can get deep into it. Yeah. But yeah, it was a cool album. My only gripe was the some of the machine gun stuff. Although it was done well,
you mean the literal song with the machine gun at the beginning of it?
No, just like the lyrical delivery at some points. It like really struck me back to some of the rap metal, like new metal days, where it was just like boo, 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 boo.
But that's the thing. It's like so far removed from that. You know?
He does it really well, but the novelty of it wore off for me pretty quickly. But all the instrumental and the song compositions were fucking phenomenal. Like the neoclassical riffs in there, I'm glad you hit on that. That stuff, I was just like, oh yeah, I like that. You know, I'm a fucking 17th century girl. My skirt's getting lifted.
Oh, too hot for castles. Castle Maiden's gone wild.
Yeah.
I honestly, this is like the most rapidly I've probably taken to something new and kind of like added it to my repertoire. And honestly, I didn't really get in that deep into it until like a few listens in. And it's not that hard of a listen because it's only a half hour long. They pack so much shit.
Yeah, it's
The
dense.
sheer speed.
It's not a can of snakes. It's a sardine can full of like 20 snakes, and you pop that sucker open, and it just keeps coming. It's like the clown and the handkerchief gag just keeps coming.
I feel like if you're turned off by the lyrics, it would be nice to have like a, an instrumental version of it so you can just appreciate that wild ride. Because although there is plenty of things to appreciate, there is a lot to appreciate just in the lyrics if you read them, because you cannot understand them when they're being said. First thing,
for a lot of people, yeah.
when I found this in the YouTube video that I initially listened to it on, the person said, I really like the part. Top comment was like, I really like the part where it's like, bugga, bugga, booga, booga, ooga, booga, boog.
The fast delivery and stuff, but I'm glad that you felt the same way, that it was like a technically way more spicy Death Clock.
Right.
I got that vibe right away. I was like, oh, it's Death Clock with some chops.
All right. So let's
You want to do the nightmare juice?
that is still metal, but drastically different.
Yeah, drastically different.
Drastically.
It's nightmare juice.
I'm getting that.
It was nightmare juice for you.
Yeah, I tried to listen, like I had to start it and then stop.
My album was
and then start it again and then stop.
My album was Leviathan's Scar-Sighted, that came out in 2015 by multi-instrumentalist Rest, or Jeff Whitehead. He's been in a couple black metal projects like Krieg, and I think he might have helped out with Knocked Mysticism and some other bands. But Scar-Sighted got my attention because when I first heard about Rest, or Jeff Whitehead, he was having some legal issues, and it kind of all faded down a little bit. He
like legal issues with music, or legal issues with fucked up shit he's already done.
There was going to be he was getting charged with some fucked up shit that he had supposedly done. It got dropped as not guilty, and then he released this album, which got picked up by. I actually saw an article about it in Rolling Stone.
This?
Yeah,
in Rolling Stone.
Yep, got some high marks. And I was
okay.
and I sat there and I was
must have been something I missed. I mean, honestly, it must have been because it's on it. It's the ambient soundtrack of getting. It's the soothing sounds of being flayed alive.
Yeah, it is.
And house. What's that house with the fucking upside down flayed guy in Game of Thrones? Bolton. House Bolton.
It is definitely getting dragged through some levels of absolute extreme physical torture.
It's like you're at the beginning of the dungeon, and not at the beginning of it either. Like later on, there's some good ambient parts in it.
Yeah, there's
but then there's some ambient parts where it's just a guy
screaming
down in the dungeon that you've just been brought into. He's just like,
That's exactly how it is, though. And it's great to play at work.
That's the thing. You guys at work, you can't wear headphones, right?
Yeah. I play it at work every once in a while, just like, this is agonizing torture.
This is what you get for taking the headphones away. Now everybody has to listen to my shit. It's company policy.
I do enjoy it, though, because it's fucking
masochistic.
It's definitely a tap in a man's inner frustrations.
Well, what's the story then? Is there something behind
an overarching story?
Not necessarily overarching story like that, but is there something that drove this? Because it's a multi-instrumentalist, like you said, right? It's not a band.
It's one man band.
Now I would have figured my pick would have been a one-man band with all like the machine gun drums and shit like that. It's not. I would have figured this would have been like a full band.
No,
You know?
it's just one dude. He's released multiple albums. He just all does it by himself. And even when he worked with some other bands, he did multiple of their instruments for the recording. I think on Krieg he did bass guitars and drums, not vocals.
Now,
Something ridiculous like
to
that.
shit on him a little bit, then that kind of makes a little bit more sense because it's all so bad. I mean, if you like drone, it's like a lot of things that are like not necessarily complicated, and they drone on for a really long time, and it makes you really, really suffer through it. And I mean it.
And get raked across the coals. Yeah.
Why did you pick this album? Why this album, Stefan?
It was a hard week. I thought I'd share some of my anguish.
Do you identify with this? Is like let you bring out some of that?
That's
angst
definitely
in
an
listening to
anguish.
this?
That's definitely an anguish releaser just of
Listening to somebody else be in pain.
being in pain too, yeah. I mean, it definitely has like some great ambient parts, and
Oh yeah, absolutely.
there's like a couple catchy riffs. They're not fucking earth breaking or earth shattering or anything like that, but
I remember
presents-
thinking that, but I can't remember them.
But it definitely presents itself in the way that it's meant to be presented.
Flayed alive.
Yeah, being flayed alive. It's a goddamn man's journey through fucking rings of torture. You know, it's fucking Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, but
Damn
there's
near.
way more than fucking 9 rings.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's an hour of rings.
yeah. But there are some like really cool, like I feel like tritone progressions. There's some like cool, clean ambiances that are like nice contrasts, and I guess it's like a different kind of punishment than I'm used to because everybody who's listened to me say this before on a music review is I like punishment with reward, and then more punishment as a format.
And this, it's tons of punishment, a slight ambient reward, and then you realize I still have to continue going on this death march.
Like, it's more so punishment for me because, like, this is stuff that's it's so grating but so simple. It's like the simple aspect of what makes something grating that they just draw out. Like, there's nothing for me to like dig into and think it's like, oh, they did like this kind of thing here. There's like no complicated rhythms or anything like that for me to like kind
To
of
grasp onto.
or preoccupy my mind with and with like analysis. You are literally just being tortured. That's how I felt because, like I said, I had to start this and I was like, I can't fucking listen to this. I have to stop. And then I had to start it again and I was like, I can't fucking listen to this. I have to stop. Because I was at work and I was like, I can't do this at fucking work.
Did you enjoy the audio clip from, I think it's Constantine, where it's just like, oh, he's already endured so much pain?
I didn't gather that that's where that was from.
Or something. It's like, he's already endured so much pain. So much pain.
Oh.
At least he has hell to look forward to.
I did remember like forming a thought earlier that there was some. I did enjoy the chants. There was some just like, and there was like some chants where the vocal style I would be described as the tonality of burping. That it's like very low and toad-like and drawn out. Like, you know, I do like some like monk chants and like some Om kind of like tones in the ambient. That was cool. Like, I kind of forgot about that, but I remember like thinking to myself earlier, that was cool. But then they directly contrast that with a man getting his skin cut off with a scalpel. Like, that is the instrument somebody is playing. It's like, oh, let's peel this man's skin off like a banana and listen to him scream.
But there are some songs on there I do like Gardens Acropolite, which means gardens of fossilized poop. And and within Thrall, those songs have those fun ambient parts and some, like I said, they're not complicated riffs, but they're still enjoyable. They're not, for you, memorable. But as a man who went through
different strokes.
Yeah, as a man who enjoy getting some anguish relief through song, it's anguish relief. It is a man being flayed alive, and sometimes I'm just having such a bad day. That's great.
I enjoy release like through other things, mainly masturbation. But I don't know, listen to like somebody else just getting tortured at the other end of a fucking very long hallway. Like honestly, like some of the other heavier parts where it's like guitar playing and just like it's very droney through a lot of parts. Like that's the thing. It's very much so drone, like disguised in another genre. But those parts were worse for me as a guitar player than I welcomed the sweet songs of a man getting his flesh ripped off when those parts came.
Maybe I'll
chop that up, you fucking internet gurus. We used to play music in the background so you couldn't make us seem like fucking masochistic psycho killers.
Well, maybe I'll give you some good chanting for the next one. Some Gregorian chants.
I like that stuff.
But then I'd have to do a metal pick.
But just not in... no. We can't do metal next week.
No metal?
No metal.
I agree. All right.
All right.
But it was decidedly tortureful for you.
Oh, yeah. Dude, could you actually call up the that comment? Because I want to do the addendum to the Igor.
Oh, let me bring up Scarsided.
No, actually, I have it written.
Let me bring up Scarsided's album cover here, too.
Yeah,
that's another thing with the artist that made this. This guy does tattoos and art, and he's also done some deck art for like Anti-Hero Skateboards and some other companies.
Come, stay a while.
He's an interesting man.
You think that's what Deckard's name came from, was deck art?
Yeah.
Where was this thing I had written down? Wanted to do an addendum to... I think I actually wrote it in the Bugsy account. I don't want to drag people along for like me digging through this for this information.
I can get it real quick.
Yeah, like I don't know, man. That was a challenge. I knew it was going to be rough.
So last week you talking about the Leviathan album? Yeah, I gave you a hard one there.
Like for the first one. Last week we kind of like talked together where we're gonna, instead of just like springing albums on each other and like having a strictly organic conversation, we would at least like use the advantage of our own unique views on music and like kind of like each person has
because we definitely see things differently. Yeah.
But we appreciate the same things, but we see them, in different ways.
Yeah. But we did a review of Igor last week, and we decided to take on this new format because I enjoy looking at the history and stuff of the bands, and Doug's a more technically, musically side inclined. So
yeah, I kind of tend to like look at the production of things, the instrumentation, the styles I see in it.
And he really enjoyed Igor last week, but he didn't necessarily know
everything.
Some of the fun facts, which another viewer actually posted on our video, which Doug wanted to add an amendum to such a great band for him.
So the Chicken was actually given an album credit. Its name was Patrick, and it was given a solo in a song called Vegetable Soup from the previous album, which I had seen like on the track listing. I just like was so like
Patrick's getting his, huh?
When I was making these things music reviews was kind of like a classically was like a secondary thought because it was originally Sean's idea, and I was
Rest
just
in
like,
peace.
R.I.P. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I still feel like even if it was just like a late in the week thing, I was still like putting more into it. But I was picking artists that I knew more about then.
Yeah.
But I started like with these going forward. I want to pick artists I know fucking nothing about.
Yeah, find some new people, get some fresh takes on stuff.
So back to this Igor addendum. What I found really interesting about this thing was that this guy composed a sonata by throwing chicken feed on a keyboard and letting his chicken peck at it, and he used the notes that, like, not necessarily used it verbatim, but like what is chicken pecked at, he used those notes to kind of
to string the rest together.
yeah. And with like certain things, like you can there's certain methods of like production that you can use to just put something in a certain mode. I'm thinking that might have been what he did to just make it more like structurally cohesive instead of just like a chicken to be like bong boom bom boom 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 boom. You can just like lay out a certain scale, and that's all the notes you can hit.
And then you end up with something that's all like ba-dum, bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, because it just works within a certain scale. I think that's what he did. There's another band that I've actually I want to bring up later that I listened to their stuff earlier this week, and it sounds very similar to one of the things that comes across in this Igor. But the person who wrote in basically said this.
Matt Manson.
Yeah, Matt Manson.
User.
Matt
Thank
Manson.
you so much for writing in.
Yeah. He basically said if you are into like a more like structured style, they have it with like the same people, like a few of the same people. There is an operatic female singer that he works with that he's done another project with. They've basically developed their own kind of language based around emotion. And emotion is...
Is it the flaying screams of people trapped in a dungeon?
No, it is... I mean, if that, some people's torture is another person's boner, but it's like very operatic. Like that could be torture to somebody else. I don't necessarily like opera, but in this like sense, I kind of do. This other album from this other band is much, much different. You can hear some of the similarities in the singing, but in the instrumentation, it's like
vastly different.
Vastly different. Vastly different. What else we got in here?
Patrick the chicken has since passed away.
Oh, yeah. Patrick
Which is very
the chicken
unfortunate.
has passed away.
Which is very unfortunate because I'm sure it was a big part of the Igor Club. Igor Club.
All right, man.
It's always hard to lose a pet, especially one that helps you create something like this wonderful chicken.
As brilliant as this piece of sludge right behind you. Let's you move a little bit over for our boy. Let's get a nice little shot of him. Somebody actually said, like, how much of the podcast has to deal with this cat? Because I use the cat because people love cat pictures on Facebook.
Are we talking about cats? Get your cats spayed and neutered. Don't get your cats declawed.
Love them every day.
Yeah, keep the litter box clean and the bowl full.
I mean, not that full because...
This one will just eat until it explodes.
All right. It is time to go. I bid you good fucking day.
Enjoy the flayed screams of people trapped in a dungeon.